Guys and girls, $2 million for a one better. When is this going to happen? Is this going to happen? Can this happen? We're going to talk about the history of the one better and the future of the one better with capital growth. Stay tuned.
Good morning.
Billy DRURY, agent of 7 years. Mark Novak, agent of 30 years. Welcome, everybody.
Reporting for duty. Thank you for tuning in. Look, this is a good topic this morning. I was at a Sunday open home yesterday with a client, and we were talking about their grandfather's house growth from $32,000 to just shy of $3.5 million over the course of 5 decades. And you know, he was sort of saying that watching his grandfather come to the point of selling, never in all those years would he ever have imagined that kind of growth. And we were talking about that property going from 32,000 to multi-millions, not just one, and the changes with that. And it struck this conversation this morning because one-bedroom apartments, ladies and gentlemen, as of not just this week, but we are seeing it more and more, have hit $1 million, and I think that's pretty. It's a bit of a monumental time and thing to report in the DY marketplace, Northern Beaches, Sydney, and these are not like one bedrooms that are hundreds of square meters. These are 50, 60 square meters internally, which is just really interesting.
And look, I had a similar conversation, fun enough, as well. And I was talking with my daughter's boyfriend about the building costs. So when a quantity surveyor prices buildings, they're like bank valuers for building costs, right? When a quantity surveyor prices units pre-COVID, it was $300K. What I mean by that is a 1-bedroom, a 2-bedroom, a 3-bedroom, the blended cost for a box was $300,000. That cost is almost hitting $700,000, not including land, not including any profit for the person that's building the project. It's just the raw cost. So I was saying to him, if developers are looking at sites these days, they're losing money on building these one-bedders. They better be making a lot of money when building the 3-bedders and 2-bedders, because when you're building, the government doesn't allow you not, with their codes and practices, they don't allow you to not build 1-bedrooms. You must have a certain amount of 1-bedders, a certain amount of 2-bedders, and a certain amount of 3-bedders when you're building these buildings. There's slight flexibility, but there's not a lot. But my point is, Billy, when the build cost is $700,000, and then you look at the land cost of $200,000 or $300,000 and profit of 20%, which is $200,000 or $300,000, you're at 1.2 for a 1-bedder, 1.3 if you want a new one in Blacktown, in Chatswood, in Rosebery. That's just the cost for a Sydney build. The build doesn't get cheaper if you're 45 minutes west or 45 minutes east.
Yep, the land component may change a little bit, but there are core elements to get a project out of the ground, and build cost is one of them, right at the forefront. It's interesting, right? What's making a $1 million apartment a $1 million apartment? Well, that's a large part of it. There's, for certain parts of Sydney, no more land. And Sydney is an interesting sort of position on a map, because we've got Blue Mountains to one side and ocean to another side. Then you go up the coast. So there's actually quite a concentrated piece of real estate in the middle. Very desirable.
And also the building principles, they're trying to stick in rather than like corkscrewing out. So, building more. And I was talking with my neighbor about this one. And he was telling me, and I was like, I've always been rattling that about that. Instead of corkscrewing out of the sea, but out of Sydney, when they go further and further out of the corkscrew, they've got to build another hospital. Another hospital, another hospital, another hospital, another shopping centre, another, and they've got more schools, more schools, more schools. So the infrastructure is so much more labour intensive and costly for a government. The government would just prefer infill, where they can go vertical. They've already got the transport. They've already got the hospitals. Just make the hospitals a little bit bigger. Hence units.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. And another thing that I thought might be interesting here to touch on is the age of the first home buyer. It's getting older and older. It's now reported that the first home buyer is between 34 to 37 years of age in Australia. So who are buying these one-bedroom apartments for $1 million today? Well, it's someone who's a lot older than who would have been 20, 50 years ago, like the grandfather analogy we were talking about when he was buying his $32,000 house. These guys were getting into their first properties at the age of 20 because the income supported to buy that property was a lot less. Now people are having to come out of education, whether that be secondary school or university, before they've even qualified for a really strong income. They've had to have some years in the workplace. So the first home buyer is getting a lot older. That's also interesting.
But guess what? They're living longer.
Yeah.
So a lot of people are thrashing out a degree for 4 years, not earning an income. They're carrying a HECS debt, they're not earning your income, so they're buying a little bit later. But, and I had this conversation during last week. I was saying that we're probably living from 2 generations ago, probably a solid, I reckon, I don't know scientifically, but I reckon 10 or 15 years longer. I remember people going in their 70s was like, that's terrible. And now it's like, oh my God, that's so young. So we expect that late. And people going into their 90s was, that's bloody amazing. And now it's like, yeah, that's good. So I think, what's my point? How does that affect what you've just said? I think if you're buying a little bit later as a first home buyer, it still fits in the stretch.
What do you reckon? When are we going to start seeing normal $2 million one-bedroom apartments? Is that on the horizon?
I reckon it's 10 years.
So you reckon it's that average doubling every 10 years?
More? I think it's more. So look, and for anyone who's watching them, some people may be freaking out saying, what the hell are you talking about? 1 bedroom? Like, we're in northern beaches of Sydney. It is slightly more expensive than most of Sydney. We do an entry level 1 bedder is 700,000. But if you want to get a new one, then you're up towards the 950 for a new one. And I've been like, people say to me, how's the property market going? And I'm like, look, it's been fantastic the last 100 years. And I think it's going to be fantastic the next 100 years. Like this morning, we've been talking very, very long term. If you haven't noticed, and that's the position to take when you're buying property or when you're talking property. It's never a jump in, jump out, Bitcoin style attitude. It's a long haul. So, Billy, I just know that capital growth for units has been stunted, and I know the numbers in Sydney and in all the suburbs, and how everything's performed over a 10-year period, and units have underperformed. So I think, considering the underperformance of units compared to houses, and then I think again overlaying what you've said, that 10-year thing over the next 10 years, I think the unit's going to do a lot more better than anyone expects. And then I think it's being underpinned by building being expensive and underpinned by rent being expensive.
Look, in contrary to that, the only way I see this process being slowed down is either one, policy changes around density, getting more properties to fill out that price point. And we are seeing a little bit of that, but again, it's not
Still
changing the build
expensive to
cost.
build. Still
It's so
expensive to build.
And two, just the lending side of it as well. I don't know what the position needs to be of a client to lend them $2 million for a one-bedroom apartment in 10 years, but that'll be an interesting thing to look out for. As long as, I mean, inflation's there, and as long as income and salary growth is there, that sort of needs to remain in that sequence. But yeah, it'll be interesting. I think this is a fascinating topic.
Oh, look, and sure we are spruikers, but I feel like it's just reality rather than spruiking. What the price is going to do in 10 years. It's just what's going to happen. It's just how it's always rolled. So what do you do to prepare for it? My answer would be rent vest. So put a tenant into the property that you're going to get into. Beg, borrow, steal to get that loan. You generally can't go wrong. Get it rented out. Stay conservative. You did it, Billy. I did it. We bought properties and we stayed with our families until the finances got stronger. But the big secret is get in earlier and stay consistent with your appetite of purchasing. So do that upgrade or get that next property as soon as you can, and rent vesting is a great way to do it.
Finishing statement, they say that time in the market is better than timing, ing the market. I didn't make that one up, but I like to share it.
Like to spruik it. Bill, thank you very much for your advice. I can't believe you've been doing this for 7 years. When you said that the other day, I was like, what?
Yeah, this is year 7. Full 7 years in December of this year.
You don't look like it, Billy. You don't look like it.
People say that. We've got a really good skincare package.
He's the old man stuck in a young man's body. I always said that. It's becoming more apparent. But have a great day, everyone. And it looks like it's going to be a rainy week in Sydney. So our city's going to be cleaned with the rain.
Lovely.
Take care.
Have a good day. Thanks so much.
See ya. Bye.